Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 486 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's episode features Merideth, and she's here to talk about being the mother of a child with type 1 and about understanding, creating, and cooking for a Fodmap diet. That's a funny word, right? Fodmap? It's not actually a word. It's an acronym. This episode is going to be ad-free. It's a Memorial Day celebration. No ads. Hey. But it is part of the How We Eat series. Now, if you're not familiar with that, I'm going to spend 20 seconds explaining it before the episode starts. But it's going to happen after I tell you that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. All right, let the music finish up. I'll spend those couple of seconds talking about how we eat, and then we get right into the episode with Merideth, who, by the way, is a super fan of the show, and I'm sure right now is shaking in her pants listening to this. The How We Eat series is building up a nice little repertoire. Is that the word I mean? It doesn't matter. So right now we have episode 373, Vegan Cat, which is not about a cat. Episode 400, Carnivore. Episode 405, Plant-Based. Episode 439, Gluten-Free. Episode 453, Low Carb. Episode, oh boy, ready? Here we go again. Episode 480, Dr. Bernstein, and today's episode 486, Fodmap. And there are many more coming. This has become a favorite for people, and I'm very much enjoying having these conversations. I hope you enjoy this one with Merideth. Check out the others.
Hi, my name is Merideth, and I am the mom of 3 children, one of whom is a type 1 diabetic.
Cool. And Merideth, you're on today to talk about an eating style, is that right?
I am.
Okay.
We have a lot of interesting food issues. The reason that I'm here is to talk about the low FODMAP diet, but we actually eat not just low FODMAP. My daughter has lots of food allergies as well, so that also interacts with diabetes and low FODMAP.
Okay. So I assume that first you present with a food allergy, and then how does that present itself the first time it happens?
With food allergies?
Yeah, like what's the first, like what's the remembrance you have of like, hey, does anybody notice she turns purple when we eat lettuce or something like that? Like whatever happens.
Yeah, it goes back for us before. My daughter that's diabetic is my second child. And so the food allergies go back to my first child. So really, we were prepared for it. So with my first daughter, my oldest I've got a girl, boy. And the oldest was just presented with food allergies when she was 2 months old and had eczema and was fussy all the time. And so that was just from sort of essentially birth. And we figured it out through what, I was nursing and what I was eating. And then as we were introducing, and I had to eliminate foods from my diet. And as we were introducing foods to her diet, she had some full-blown reactions. By the time my second daughter, who was the type 1 diabetic, by the time she was born, we were like assuming she had allergies. We didn't know. And it was also the way they treated allergies then is very different than what they do now. That's a whole, it's changed a lot over the years. Now they introduce peanuts to kids practically from birth. At like 4 months old, they want to give them peanut powder, and based on a whole study in actually started in Israel, but where they give kids bamba, which is like this peanut snack anyway. Yeah. And they found that kids had fewer peanut allergies. But when my kids were sort of in that sweet spot where they were preaching total avoidance, and they've since changed some of the recommendations. But at any rate, when Eve was born, we ended up testing her for a lot of foods and avoiding a lot of foods initially, and she tested positive for a lot of food allergies. So a lot of her allergies are to things that she actually never even ate. So we didn't know for sure that how she would react. And then later, we would go to we'd go to the allergist yearly and have blood and skin tests. And she either had she had a couple of accidental exposures, but they were kind of minor because we were so careful all the time. So I never, thankfully, had really a full-blown turning purple when she really horrible reactions. But I carry an epi with me all the time and everything else. But she did have several food challenges in the office, which is my kids laugh at the name. But essentially, you go to they go to the allergist's office and they give you a little bit of the food that they think you might have outgrown, and then a little more, and then a little more, and then a little more, and hope that you don't
Turn
get
purple.
sick and turn purple and whatever. Anyway, and she had some that were successful and some that were not. And some of those ended with EpiPens and yeah.
Well, let me go all the way back to your first child and your breastfeeding. So you figure out she has allergies to something and you eliminate it from your diet.
Yep.
That's kind of fun. So what did you have to eliminate with your first daughter?
Oh, wow. Well,
do you remember?
When I was nursing, I eliminated dairy, eggs, nuts, sweet, soy. I don't remember. She's 19 now.
What were you eating? Would you just like styrofoam with salt, or what did you have by the time you eliminated everything?
Well, there's we do a lot of meat and potatoes in our house. Meat, and chicken and rice and a lot of rice, which is causes the interaction of all of the food issues is, I think, one of the hardest things around. With diabetes too, because then as each condition sort of builds on the other, and then it becomes because my daughter also has stomach issues. She's always had stomach aches, and even her allergies, which some of the things we didn't know, she would get a lot of stomach aches, and we didn't know whether she was allergic. She said, she didn't feel well after she ate things, and that's actually why it turns out she's eating a low Fodmap diet. Which is something that is usually it's a treatment for IBS, and she didn't know whether she was allergic to every single thing she was eating. She kept getting these stomach aches, and it turns out that she had to avoid foods for that reason. And it turns out so then there were things that were good for her to eat to avoid for the low FODMAP diet, but aren't good to eat because of her allergies, and then she was diagnosed with diabetes. But it's but that's, you should have these low carb things. And there's a whole list of low carb things. And she's allergic to half of them. It's just, we sort of had to look at the list and say, well, she can't have this, she can't have this, she can't have this. And you just cross off half the things.
Wow. So there's basically 3 different things to consider.
Oh, by the way, we keep kosher.
Yeah. So 4 different things to consider.
Just, why not?
Just, I mean, honestly, how many things could be left, right? So you remove okay. All right. So I understand all that. What does FODMAP stand for?
Okay. So FODMAP, which is a crazy diet, when FODMAPs are, and I'll read you this that I took off the internet. FODMAPs are a collection of short chain carbohydrates, which are sugars, that aren't absorbed properly in the gut and can trigger symptoms in people with IBS. And they're naturally found in many foods and food additives. And there are 4 kinds, and they're hard to pronounce, so I'll do my best. But they're oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. And so when we were advised by Eve's doctor to go on the low FODMAP diet, I said, okay, sure, I can do this. I've done food allergies. All 3 of my kids and my husband have multiple food allergies.
Wow.
I said, I can do this. I've done this for years, and I cook in all these crazy ways. And they aren't all allergic to the same things. So I said, sure, just tell me what she has to avoid. And then they gave me like the list, and it's not a category. It's like some fruits are high in FODMAPs and some are low in FODMAPs, and some are percentages. Like with food allergies, if you can't have eggs, you can't have eggs.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's it. And just a little bit can kill you. If you can't have peanuts, it'll kill you,
Yeah.
So I'm used to that. With FODMAPs, one of the things that you can have, depending, there also some people can tolerate certain amounts of certain things. But for example, peaches, which is, a favorite fruit of my daughter's, she could have like one peach or one nectarine, or if she had a nectarine or a peach today or tomorrow, she couldn't have a, watermelon the next day, because then it builds, and it's sort of too many FODMAPs together will then affect her stomach.
So you can have things that impact not quite as hard, but if you stack them up too close to each other day after day, it's the same impact as having something that strikes her that hard.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And so what you usually do at the beginning is you do a total elimination diet, and then you add in a food from each of the different 4 categories, or some of the foods from each of the 4 categories separately, and you add them back into your diet to see whether it's one of the categories or 2 or 3 that are affecting you. So for example, the oligosaccharides are fructans and GOS, which are in foods like wheat, rye, onions, garlic, and legumes. So onion and garlic are completely out of our diet now. My husband always used to joke that I put black pepper and garlic salt on everything, I made. That was just sort of our staple. And I now don't use garlic at all. Although, oddly, you can, in a low FODMAP diet, you can flavor things with garlic. You can flavor the oil with garlic, but apparently the garlic doesn't get absorbed into the actual oil. So you can infuse garlic with oil and then remove the actual garlic. There are all these really weird tricks. And then like the scallions, you can use the green part of the scallion, but not the white part of the scallion. There's a whole Australian university called Monash that's devoted to this. I don't know if they're devoted to it, but they have a unit or a division that focuses on FODMAP. And they're really detailed, and they have an app and everything that talks all about low FODMAPs. And it's fascinating because this is very scientific. It sounds like complete voodoo to me when I was reading the list. Like, for example, for the monosaccharides are fructose. So there's a lot of overlap. It's really interesting when you talk about diabetes and how you eat and carbs. And when you were talking about when I was listening to the episode on glycemic index, there's a lot that sort of overlaps. It's different, but it sort of comes at it from a different angle, but there's a lot of kind of overlapping, interesting things. And so with the monosaccharides, I'll just tell you that the fructose is one. So it's in honey and apples. And like, she can't have honey, apples, or high fructose corn syrup, but she can have maple syrup, for example.
Okay. Do you know, I guess there's no way to, by the way, this sounds exhausting.
It is.
At no point were you just like, oh God, I'm going to leave them at the mall, and that'll be the end of this, because we're just let mommy's going out and just never come back, and you guys are going to have to fart your whole lives because I'm not doing this. Like, what is it? I mean, seriously, like, just thinking about an elimination diet, first of all, to get your answers about what it is that you can and can't eat, or should or shouldn't be eating. Like, how do you start an elimination diet? Is it like with a piece of chicken that you boil and then and everyone eats it in horror? They're just like, oh, it's terrible. And then
there's honestly, like, I mean, that's the thing, is that it starts with total paralysis is what it starts with.
Okay.
And you kind of go, oh my God, what am I going to feed the family? Which is actually kind of the way I started with diabetes too. Like, oh my God, how am I going to feed my daughter? But then slowly I did what I did with food allergies too. And I went to the internet and I looked for Facebook groups, and I looked for recipes, and I looked for resources. And essentially I started with brand new recipes. And I just looked, you Google, you go to Pinterest, you go wherever, and you find low FODMAP recipes. And then what I would do is I would modify them, because inevitably it would have something in it that my kids were allergic to. And then, or something they didn't like, or something that was an ingredient that, I couldn't get or whatever. But I tend to make a lot of different meals, which is, one of the things that, they say, if your kids don't want your main meal that you make for dinner, like just tell them they can have cereal tonight. When everybody's allergic to different things and everyone has these special diets, it's not really fair at some point to say, well, too bad.
Yeah. What's the reaction of, you, the children, everybody, the family, when you realize that this is the way you're going to eat? I realized it was probably different for you because of the food allergy thing, but I'm trying to imagine if I went to Arden tomorrow and I said, hey, we're going to eliminate everything from your diet to figure out why something happens. She probably would kill me in my sleep. So I'm trying to figure, seriously, or at least put up one hell of a fight about it. I can envision her saying, I'd rather my stomach hurt than do this. So,
well, I think that there are a couple of issues that you're there.
Yeah.
As far as the food allergies, I actually think it was easier because my kids were diagnosed with them really from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't know what it's like to eat whatever. My oldest has now outgrown all her nut allergies. And the craziest thing is that she now eats like all nuts. I mean, it's just blows my mind when she eats peanuts and cashews and walnuts and talks about the differences. And, I just is totally crazy. I'm used to thinking of them as poison. But so they didn't know what it was like. They didn't know what they were missing. That's something that was almost easy. It was harder when they went to school and more of a social component.
Mm-hmm.
And going out with their friends and going to restaurants, those kinds of things were the most difficult. For the low FODMAP diet, which diabetes came in between, and then the low FODMAP diet came after. So in terms of timing, so with diabetes, we don't eat differently really for diabetes. There was only a very short period of time when Eve was first diagnosed that she didn't have one of those horrible diagnosis stories where she was admitted. She wasn't in DKA. She had a whole variety of health issues for about a year where we were trying to figure out what the heck was wrong with her, which included a lot of stomach issues, which actually had been going on for much of her life. She'd had a lot of stomach discomfort. And I went to one doctor for a second opinion who did a whole battery of blood tests. And I got a call the next day and it's like, where's your daughter? And I'm like, well, she's at school.
Yeah.
And they're like, her blood sugar is really high. You need to come get her and redo her blood test. And I'm like, yeah, I'm going to pick her up it was actually some other test for something else. Cause like I said, she was having all these other issues and I'm going to get her in a couple hours and take her to the doctor for something. They're like, no, you need to go now. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know anything about blood. I don't know anything about diabetes and I don't know what they're talking about.
We don't eat sugar in my house. There's no sugar in her blood.
To get on the subway, I'll call literally about to get on the subway. I'll talk to you later. And I got off the subway 3 stops later and the phone rang, my cell phone rang and they're like, it's the doctor. Where are you? And I'm like, huh?
It's really important, huh? Yeah.
They're like, you're not getting it.
Give me a half a second.
Go get your daughter and you need to have this checked. But anyway, I lost my train of thought and why I was,
well, while you're finding your train of thought, I'm taking off my headphones to take off the sweatshirt. Hold on a second.
Okay.
How incredibly unprofessional of me was it to do that right in the middle of the episode? I would never forgive myself if I was you. But since we're taking the break, have you heard about the Diabetes Pro Tips series that begins at episode 210? If you haven't seen it, you can check it out at juiceboxpodcast.com or diabetesprotip.com, or just go back in your app to episode 210. I'd also like to recommend, as I said earlier, the How We Eat series. If you're interested in algorithm-based pumping, there's a whole series about that. We have Defining Diabetes, which I'm very proud of. It's terms about type 1 diabetes that are explained, but not in a dry way. There are short episodes with Jenny Smith and I. We explain the term and then put it into some context for you. So sort of like, imagine if you saw a hammer, didn't know what a hammer was, and someone just said, it's a hammer. You use it to strike a nail. That would be not very helpful. But if you said, it's a hammer, you use it to strike a nail, and then explained what a nail was and why you might want to use a nail, well, then that would be useful information. To me, that's what Defining Diabetes is. I'm just going to take this moment to let you know about another series that's coming up also with Jenny Smith. It's going to be called Variables. Super interesting. We had, look at me, I'm like, it's super interesting. You know, now you either have to believe me or you don't. It's up to you. Went to the Facebook page, the private Facebook page for the podcast, and asked for people to make a list of things that impacted their life with diabetes. And a list came back, I think over 150 things long. And Jenny and I are going to do these very short kind of burst episodes about variables. So you'll start seeing them soon. Yeah, that's fair. You're going to start seeing them soon. That is so much better.
Okay, good. Anyway, so she then was diagnosed, and basically what they told us, so then we had like 2 days where they knew her blood sugar was high, and we had an appointment the next day, or one day, and they had an appointment the next day at the diabetes clinic. They got us in right away, but they told us we could go home, and then we went back in for training, like outpatient. And we came in like 2 or 3 days in a row for hours long sessions of how to learn to use insulin and count carbs and all this stuff. But they basically told us for, 2 or 3 days, like, just eat really low carb, like don't eat any carbs for the next 2 days, was essentially what they told us. So while we went home, because our blood sugar wasn't crazy high, but they're like, just eat, have protein and don't have any carbs while we're doing this.
You're like, just give me a list. I know how to eliminate things from a diet. This won't be any trouble whatsoever.
Right. So in that case, that was just a couple of like days where we really ate very, like, she had a lot of cucumbers and meat. And then in general with diabetes, we don't eliminate food from our diet all that often, except for, sometimes like she had an important test and I was like, let's not have dessert tonight. Let's try to have a really low carb dinner tonight, or, let's see what's going to not impact your blood sugar a lot. She's a junior in high school now. Yeah. Those kinds of things. So in that respect, I think about her diet with her diabetes, but I don't otherwise say you can't eat X, Y, or Z because of your diabetes. Although when we had to then we had some big changes when we moved to low Fodmap, because for the elimination diet, it's not that you can't eat any foods. It's more that you pull a lot of things out of the diet, but it was one of the initial things was, well, she can't have apples. So one of the things she just was a staple for low blood sugars was apple juice.
Okay.
So I was like, oh man, like she has apple juice all the time.
Right.
Like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? So now we do grape juice, but like decided to get grape juice boxes. I think I still have juice boxes of apple juice somewhere in my back of my cabinet.
Just don't know what to do with.
Probably expired that I gotta,
What were the symptoms we're talking about? Like, because I'm looking online too, and cramping, diarrhea, constipation, stomach bloating, gas, and flatulence. Is that basically, or is it just you're in pain? Is it hard to put into words?
She had stomach pain for years and years and years. And I think she's I think let's leave it at that.
Wait, that was fascinating. You started to say something and then you stopped yourself. And now I'm going to wonder for the rest of my life what you were going to say. You don't have to say. You know what? Forget it. Say it and I'll bleep it out for you. What were you going to say?
I think we're going to leave it at that.
All right. Okay. So she had stomach pains for a long time.
Yeah. And I mean, really, since she was little, and we've seen lots of doctors and done lots of things and checked and
Well, that must be
various medicines. And this is one of the things that has helped. And it does help. And unfortunately, it doesn't help all the way for her.
Okay.
But it does help. And so when you say, is she willing to do it? Well, yeah, because it helps.
Right.
But no, it sometimes really sucks. So she wants to eat things. I mean, like licorice is like something she likes. And she, it has the Twizzlers have wheat in them. And she now is on the gluten-free diet. Well, as you know, from other things, all the gluten-free stuff stays in your system longer and has like a higher glycemic load. And it's has other issues. And cauliflower, you could do a nice cauliflower pizza crust. Well, she can't have dairy, so that's a whole other issue. But cauliflower instead of pasta, say, do riced cauliflower or something. Well, that's high Fodmap. So she can have cauliflower, but only in a small quantity. So there are a lot of interactions between the foods that cause problems, or it's just a balance between what do you want to choose. So she ends up often with higher carb choices that impact her blood sugar, and that we then have to figure out how to deal with.
Yeah. When was she diagnosed? How old again?
She was diagnosed when she was almost 12, when she was 11. Okay. She was diagnosed in 2015.
Right.
November. Actually, this is her anniversary month.
Come on. Oh, wow. No kidding. We're here. Do you know all this off the top of your head? Like if I came to your house and I had a big bag of food and I sat your daughter next to me and I started reaching at her with a banana, would you know that's okay? Or, oh my God, stop, no banana? Like, or are there times when you have to stop yourself and say, I don't even know if we're allowed to eat this or not? Like, when does it,
So I can tell you which foods everybody in my house is allergic to.
Wow.
It's actually really funny. I have a joke that I want to make, like a Venn diagram. Like a piece of art that's a Venn diagram with like who's allergic to what, and like sell them to people. But like, I just think it's funny that maybe I'm the only person in the world that thinks it's funny. But anyway,
you realize now that you said that everyone listening who doesn't think it's funny is thinking in their head, yeah, Meredith, that was not funny.
Okay.
Although someo's laughing their head off.
Inside joke in my house.
Yeah.
Bleep that part out.
No, it's staying in. You're screwed. So,
for the FODMAPs, it's interesting. I guess Eve started that when she was a little older, and also it's so complicated. I know we're on video, nobody else is, but this is a list of like some of the low FODMAP food and like different categories. I have to look. I mean, I don't remember. And then there's this app. I mentioned the app. I like literally go on the app and look. So I know a lot of them, but like, for example, she can have as many strawberries as she wants, I think, but not as many raspberries. So when I say it's arbitrary, like it's really arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like, berries are mostly okay, but like strawberries are better than raspberries. And like, really?
Right. I'm fascinated by the way that your other daughter just magically is not allergic to nuts anymore.
She's not magically.
Well, you know what I mean. You did something though, like you introduced them slowly. Is that
very slowly? And a lot of food challenges, and we spent years going to the doctor and having, crazy. And actually, we've got some food challenges scheduled, and have been canceled due to the pandemic. It's canceled a couple times for Eve. So she actually has outgrown, she did outgrow almonds. She can have almonds and she can have pecans, and pine nuts. Of course, almonds are not low FODMAP. And she has a couple food challenges scheduled, but until she tries these foods in the office, we won't know for sure. So, there are a few foods that she could potentially have outgrown, but we don't know for sure, and it's not safe to try them at home because there's really, unfortunately, no way to know for sure unless you eat the food whether you've really outgrown it. Because even though they do blood tests and skin tests, they're not foolproof, and there's really no real way to know. So
until you know. I'm imagining the horror that would come if my entire life I wasn't allowed to have an almond, and then one day someone says, "Oh, great, you can have almonds again." But this intersects poorly with your other things, so you can't have almonds. Or, by the way, I pop an almond in my mouth and I go, I don't like almonds. That would be such a downer.
When my oldest daughter had her peanut challenge, we was really excited about it. And we get to the office and she's got peanut butter in front of her and it's on a spoon. And I'm like, okay, like, go for it. And she literally, it was like a magnet repelling it from her mouth. She could not put it in her mouth. And I mean, I understand because actually I'd literally been telling her it was poison her whole life.
Right.
But she was it was like she couldn't get it in her mouth. And finally she did. And then she was like, oh, I like this. And then the other ones were easier. But and then she was fine, it turned out. But she was understandably terrified. I mean, it wasn't even terror. It was almost just like an inability to put it in her mouth. Yeah.
This would be perfect for me, I have to tell you, because I don't love food for some reason. Like I can't think of one thing that I eat and I'm like, oh, this is the thing I should eat every day for the rest of my life. I'm so happy because I'm eating whatever this is. I've never felt like that in my life. And as, I had Paul Saladino on a couple of weeks ago and I prepped by not like basically eating very low carb, more protein, the week leading up to him. So I kind of would like have something to talk about with him if in case it didn't go well, and he ended up being terrific. But I had lost like 7 pounds by the time I spoke to him. And now it's got to be like a week and a half later. I'm like 13 pounds lighter. I'm not even hungry anymore.
I just get up doing it.
Yeah. I mean, I just get up in the morning and I'm like, food, not really necessary, I guess. Huh. Yeah. I just, so I'll eat. I'll still have protein. Like yesterday I had a piece of chicken and a couple of fried eggs at one point. I think my son had bacon and I stole like 2 pieces of bacon from him. And by 9:00 last night, we were watching election returns and everybody was like snacking. And I was just like, I'm not hungry. Like, I don't know. I'm not hungry anymore. Assuming that most of my hunger comes from like the interaction of carbs in my body. I have a carb and then my body is like, it's probably like crack to it. It's like, oh my God, eat more of that, but I've eliminated so much of it now. Like, I think if you gave me 4 foods to eat, I could probably go on for quite some time like that. But
I wish that were the case for me.
Not the case for you.
There's always chocolate.
Oh, you know what? I should be completely honest. The way I get through all this is I take a small bag of Giardinelli's chocolate chips and I pick at them once or twice a day. I'll take like 5 or 6 chips and I'll be like, there we go. And that, as long as I kind of like whatever the Sweet Monster is, as long as I give the Sweet Monster that, but it has to be really good chocolate. Like if I had a Hershey's Kiss, it would make me nauseous. So there's something about like
quality,
just like
the
quality. No, I'm actually not joking because I've tried it because I'm cheap. I wanted to just do it with a Hershey Kiss, because those bag of chips are like $3. I am really cheap. The bag of chips are like $3. I'm like, that's very expensive. But that's how I've gotten through. And there are days I don't go to the chocolate chip bag, but that's really, it's fast. Like yesterday was one of those days. I was just not hungry yesterday. It never occurred to me to eat. I only ate this morning because I started getting tired. I was like, am I shutting off? So, and I'm going to eat something when I'm done speaking with you, but it's fascinating what happens to me when you take away carbs. Although that's not what you're doing. You're just, that list you showed me is crazy.
It really is.
Of how many things it's funny when you say Fodmap, it obvious, and you explained it earlier, but there are so many big words that I just want to roll over it one more time again, right? It's
sure.
It's Fodmap stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, whatever, doesn't matter.
Oligosaccharides.
Okay. Disaccharides.
Disaccharides.
Monosaccharides?
Mm-hmm.
Look at me following. Boy, you're not going to let me try the fourth one?
Oh, yeah, go for it.
Polyols?
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
right. And then, which are short chain carbohydrates. Yeah, you said all that, but the point is that when I heard FODMAP in the past, I always just associated it with you have to eliminate things from your diet for some reason. I always thought of it as like what am I trying to say? Not as a specific thing, but an idea. But it's a specific idea, incredibly specific, actually.
It's very specific, and it's based in scientific, like the examination of the scientific like molecules. Like I can't think of the right word of the elements that make up the food, and it's really, I don't know how you analyze it, but they've got scientists breaking apart what's in a watermelon and what's in a chickpea. And
oh my God. It's so funny you said that. My daughter's friend, maybe 2 years ago, they're like, they couldn't find her. Everybody's like, where's Sanjana? I can't find Sanjana. I haven't heard from Sanjana in a couple weeks. So they're texting her. And finally she's like, I'm in the hospital. Chickpea incident. and she was doing an adding, like they were re-adding things. You know, she had some allergies too, and they'd been having a lot of success. And I think somehow the counting got off with the chickpeas, and she just had too many chickpeas trying to. And the whole time I'm hearing this story, I'm like, just don't eat chickpeas. Like, who cares?
Was this a FODMAP or this was an allergy?
It was an allergy. And
because my kids are allergic to chickpeas also.
Well, okay. So listen, what's going on here? Did you marry your brother or something like that? How come how come nobody can eat anything in your? Is it in the extended family at all?
Yeah, we've got allergies in the extended family.
Okay.
Too.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, both sides of the family have allergies. I like to think that we gave them a lot of other benefits and really great genes in other ways, but no, the allergies were pretty much a perfect storm.
Wow. So here's a question that I've been dying to know the whole time. Everybody's weight average? Like, does eating like this lead to a slenderness? Is, I guess, my question.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much Evie was really skinny before she was diagnosed.
Right.
But
you consider them to be like average, but like you are like average build, like I'm trying to decide, like, does eating like this make me super skinny or not necessarily? Or even like with that gluten-free stuff, I've seen people put weight on with gluten-free because.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
No, I think that it's actually very easy to, it's actually easy to overeat and to eat too much or the wrong things because you end up, I mean, anyone can justify eating too much except for you because you don't like food.
Oh, no, I can definitely eat too much, but you have to give, like I said, it's got to be crack. It's got to be like, oh, cookie. And then my brain goes, cookie. And then I'm done.
I think sometimes if you can't choose what you want exactly, you might eat too much of something else because it's available or because, I mean, I've seen my kids like eat things that are like, they got a dessert. They don't, and they don't know if they're going to get it again or there's, something. And so they'll want, it's special, but they'll, it's sort of this like, oh my God, I got this amazing cake. And who knows if I'll ever get this cool, amazing cake again because it's really hard to get. And then they'll want to eat more than you would otherwise. But no, they're not overweight. They're not underweight. They're pretty much,
I understand. Your kids basically have a depression mentality about some foods.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I see. Okay.
And I don't know that they have it. I just think that I've seen it. I mean, when it was interesting when my oldest was little, she had no snack. No snack. She had no treats. She had no anything. And then when I found things she could have that like I didn't make myself that were store bought that were safe for her, and now there are so many allergy friendly available treats. And even low FODMAP treats you find. And there's a like low FODMAP logo that you can find on some foods now. But anyway, but now you find things I would find something in the store and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can buy a store bought packaged cupcake or whatever it is. And I'm like, wow. And then I would of course buy it because it exists.
Yeah.
Right. Like, not because we needed it, but I'm like, oh my God, we have to try this.
Oh no, sure, I understand that. Like, nobody wants a cupcake, but it says FODMAP on it. Just take it. Yeah, I see it.
Right.
Is it an expensive way to have to eat?
Egg-free, dairy-free, nut-free. How can we not get it? Right?
How by the way, is it flavor-free? or do they find? How do they figure that out?
Problem, you guys.
No, I'm wondering.
Think that we make really delicious food.
Cool, that's excellent. How do you? So you just kind of, I was going to say pepper it, but you just use different spices that you're able to use.
Yeah. And honestly, what I really try to do is I really try to make food that everyone in my house can eat, for the most part. So that's the thing about, I think low FODMAP for us was actually kind of the death knell to that a little bit, if you will. With the allergies, I mostly am able to do that. Like, even, for example, like my husband is allergic to wheat. So he was eating not exclusively gluten-free, but allergic to just wheat. So if, for example, I made spaghetti and meat sauce or whatever, I'd make 2 pots of pasta. So that was one thing that I would do separately. Like, I'd make him gluten-free pasta and I would make everybody else wheat pasta.
Yeah.
And I mean, now Eve also eats gluten-free pasta because of FODMAP. But for most other things, I would try to make a main course and most of the food that everybody would eat, with some exceptions. I think the low FODMAP somehow there are some things that I do that way and a lot of things that I do that way, but I do tend to make a little bit more. I'll make 2 things, or I'll make 2 main courses where it's the same main course, but I'll separate it out where half of it doesn't have garlic and half of it does. But there's all kinds of other spices that I've, started to use as alternatives, that I make spice mixtures. I just make I mix up my own spices. So I mix now, and, I didn't used to, but I'll mix up curry powder without garlic in it or onion. And I'll mix up a taco seasoning that doesn't have garlic and onion in it. And I mix up, and you can find, recipes for all these things online, but, there are all kinds of different spice mixtures that I'll just make. And I use a lot of oregano and basil, and I use a ton of turmeric and, Indian type spices. A lot of them don't even, necessarily call for garlic, or if they do, I just leave it out.
Right. Wow. Geez, you're so at ease with it and comfortable, which is comforting. And no, seriously, like, because you easily could have come on here and been like, oh, we have to eat like this, Scott. It's a drudgery. Every day we consider ending it. You know what I mean? But you don't feel that way. I'm assuming it's because you can make a lot of different things and you put some effort into figuring out what those things are. And people have been amenable, but I guess it's hard not to be amenable if you're allergic to something.
Well, yeah.
But did you ever run into fights with the kids? Like, did they ever say, like, look, I don't care what you say, I'm eating this? Or does that, you just got them at the right age, maybe?
I don't think that's ever been an issue. I think it's more that they might not like something that I make. So I get into a lot of like, I don't want to eat that, or I get a lot of dinner fatigue, and whether the dinner fatigue is coming from me or from them is not always consistent.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sick of making dinner because either I feel like I'll make something that people don't want to eat. There's I went to all this trouble and I made this elaborate thing and then people don't eat it. There's that a little bit, but it's even just like, I don't care what I make. I'll make anything.
Right.
Just tell me what it is that you'll all eat. So there's a little bit of that. My son eats, meat and rice, like, sauteed meat, just that plain ground meat and rice for, it's a default for like most meals. And he's very happy. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go through this phase where I'm like, that's really just not okay. Like, I have to
do something else.
His diet.
Yeah.
And then he's not happy. And then I'm frustrated. And I'm like, okay,
how old is he?
Happy. It's not that bad.
Yeah. How old is he?
He's 12.
Oh yeah. Oh, please. When Cole was 12, I gave him chicken like every day. It's a wonder he can't fly and lay an egg. I have to be honest. I've gone through, it took me years not to have my feelings hurt when I made a meal and everybody's like, it's fine. I'm like, fine. Like, you're like, fuck you. I've been in the kitchen since 2:30. What do you mean it's fine? It's amazing. And if it's not, you shut up and eat it and smile and then just later say, don't make that again. But while I'm still hot, don't tell me it's not any. Like I'm standing here, I'm like, all right, here you go. What is this on it? You sons of bitch.
The best thing I did actually is I made a Google Doc where I wrote down, like I listed the title of different recipes with a link to where I found them. And then I made a couple notes. Mm-hmm. So, because the problem is I was saving things and that people were like, oh, I really like that chili you made. And I knew that if I made it, I either printed it or I saved it in printers. I saved it somewhere or whatever. But I was like, which chili? Because I tried 2 or 3. And they're like, the one we had whenever. And I'm like, and so then I'll make the chili that I think it is. And they're like, not that one. That one was gross. And I'm like, I don't know which chili it was. And I can't figure it out.
I am terrible at that
that's insane.
Too. No, I know. I that happens too. They're like, make this again. It was good. And you make it and you're like, oh, that wasn't the right recipe apparently. So you must hate cooking shows, right? Because it's just a view of things you can't do.
Yeah, I don't watch cooking shows.
I bet you wouldn't. The whole time I was like, there's no way Meredith watches cooking shows. They must be.
I watch home decorating shows, and that's just aspirational. My home doesn't look like any of them. Like I said, I haven't had anything except protein, and I got to be coming up on like 3 weeks now. But on Sunday I got, hey Dad, can you make that pizza again? Mm-hmm. And so it's like homemade pizza. Like, so I'm going to make the dough from scratch. I'm going to do the whole thing. Right. And I'm like, am I really not going to have pizza? It seems unlikely. It seems unlikely. But I'm worried. I'm worried that my body's going to not be like, oh, why are you having flour? Like, what are you doing? We haven't had that in 4 weeks by the time I eat it. And there'll be some sort of a revolt. But I don't know. The one thing we don't do is sort of like, I guess we eat all these specialized diets, but I don't do like no flour, no whatever. I guess I do. I mean, I do no gluten for some of the people and but it doesn't, I don't.
There's a pretty wide mixture of concepts in your eating still. It's
right.
Just,
there's so many things we don't eat that I feel like I can't restrict other things.
Right.
So like, for example, a lot of what we eat at least for 2 of the kids, overlaps with vegan, but there's no way we're vegans because we eat so much meat, but my daughters are allergic to dairy and eggs. So I don't have any eggs in the house. Literally, they are not in the house. I have not ever had an egg in the house, and there's been no product that has eggs in it in the house, which is, of course, a great low-carb food.
Well, so how does this all right, I'll tell you what, I want to know how this intersects with type 1, but I want to take a detour for a second first.
Sure.
And you don't have to talk too much about this if you don't want to, but you are helping me with something. And I want to thank you where other people can hear me. Thank you.
Oh,
seriously. So, everybody who listens knows that I just got done editing a show that's going to go up tomorrow. And at one point in the show, the guy said FOMO, and he was hiking and he went on this trail somewhere. And I'm going to call the episode Hiking the FOMO Trail, which has almost nothing to do with anything that we spoke about, right? And then I'm going to write a 2-sentence description that says, this guy has type 1 diabetes, was diagnosed as an adult, and teaches overseas. That's what I'm going to write, because by the time I found him, booked him, interviewed him, edited it, put it back together, I've got 7-8 hours into his episode, and I'm gone. Like, at that point, like I can't sit down and, like, you'd be surprised that I just got done editing his show. And if you asked me to write a synopsis about it, I don't 100% know that I could, because I'm not listening to it for that as much during the editing process. And during the conversation, I'm just trying to keep the conversation moving. I'm trying to listen and ask questions that I imagine people want to know the answers to. So I'm never in a conversation the way a human being is while I'm making this podcast, right? So people complain to me a lot about it. And the more popular the podcast gets, the more frequently I get complaints. They're always very kind complaints, like, oh, I wish there was a better description of this show. And I always see that somewhere and think, yeah, I wish there was too, but I'm only one person, so this is pretty much what I have. And it was, I on the private Facebook page, it came up again pretty recently. And I just said, like, look, if you guys want to do this, that'd be terrific. And you really took like control of it. And you were very nice about it. You didn't swoop in. You're like, I'll handle this. You were like, I can be a little helpful. I think I messaged you privately and I'm like, just do this if you want to do it. Like, but leave me the hell out of it. Like, I can't really think about it too much. And you guys are doing, like, you put together like a group, right? There's 15, 16 people.
There's a great group of, I think it's about 16 people. And everyone is really, really invested and have great ideas about how to tag the episodes and summarize the episodes and give them different, information will be helpful and more searchable so that if people are looking for something specific that they can, and we'll still have all of your great fun titles, and people that want to listen from the beginning, like I did, will do that. But if you have a kid that is going through puberty and you really want to find something about that, or you're really struggling right now with your basal testing, and you want to look for that and not just find the Defining Diabetes episode about it, right, but you want to hear other people talking about it, you'll be able to search for that.
It's I am genuinely excited. I used you did a sample synopsis of Alyssa Weilerstein's episode, and I used it.
I did not know you were a cello
and
until that one. I loved it.
And so when I put it up, I was like, this is what these should look like. I found myself fairly disappointed in myself as I used it. I was like, yeah, I should have been doing this. But at the same time, it's hard. It's a nice, in my mind, it's not just a nice have, it's an amazing have. But I know how well the podcast is doing, and it did that well without descriptions of the episodes too. So I'm not I
think the reason that it's so necessary is because the podcast has done so well, and there's so many episodes now.
Yeah.
I think the more episodes there are, the more necessary it is, because when there were only 20 or 50 or 80 or even 100, then it's fun to find out that Terry lives on a boat. But when there are 400 or 600 or hopefully 1,000, maybe you kind of want to search for something specific.
Right.
And I think that the people that are interested in doing this to help you, Scott, are really interested because we've all found your podcast so helpful for us. Right. And it's a way for us to, first of all, make it even more user-friendly for us and other people, but also to say thanks, because, it's been great for us and for our kids and for all the people that you've been helping. I
very much appreciate that. I seriously do. It's a pretty big departure for me, because I was just like, I met Merideth. Listen, I know as many of you as I can through like avatars and, things people say. Like, I can't really keep up with everybody, obviously, but I remember your avatar, and I associate your avatar with reasonable things being said. Isn't that amazing? Like, that's how my brain works, right?
Thank you.
And so you jumped in, and I'm like, oh, reasonable lady with the curly hair in the picture wants to help. Okay. Like, that's... So, and I'm like, that makes sense to me, because there are crazy people I can think of. And if they would have popped in, I would have been like, oh, stay quiet and pretend you don't see that. So I would have handled it a different way. But it really is, it's amazing. You guys developed a list, like basically this form to fill out while somebody listens back to an episode and fills the form out so that the information can be put in. And I tried to give to the whole project on my end as much as I could too. And somebody donated some money through the blog. I used the money to pay for a service to do transcripts of the podcasts. And so very slowly I've added transcripts online. I haven't told anybody yet. They're there. If you find them, they're there, but I'm not correcting them. Meaning, like, I don't do a transcript and then go through it and go, oh, it made Juicebox 2 words, basils with an I. Like, you'll get the idea if you're reading it. But I've been adding them slowly because that is another thing people ask for that they don't ask for a lot. But I'm like, okay, well, that seems reasonable to do. So I've been doing that. It's a ton of work. I swear to you, as I started doing it, I was like 8 episodes into it. I was like, why did I do this? I just should have continued to ignore people's desire for a transcript. But I am doing that, and I have heard back from a couple of people who found them on their own. I was like, hey, I just read episode 11, and I'm like, wow. And you have to understand that from my perspective, I love the podcast. Like, I could listen to the podcast on my own, but it's still, when you hear somebody say they read a transcript of a 45-minute conversation you had, it's overwhelming to hear somebody say that. You know what I mean? You're just like, no, come on. Because I start talking in the kitchen, and halfway through my sentence, my wife walks out, and I'm like, oh my God, sometimes I'll be like, there are like a lot of people waiting to hear what I have to say. And she's like, I'm not one of them. And she like rolls out of the room. I'm like, oh Jesus, that was harsh. But anyway.
Well, my family is pretty sick of you too. I talk about you a little too much.
You tell them to screw off too. I don't care. If they all know they're not careful, I'll feed them a blueberry. And so,
I think blueberries are okay, but only in maybe limited quantities. I'll have to check on that.
I did my best, I guess.
I'm going to look and I'll tell you.
It's like I have an app on my phone here. I can tell you right now if you can kill my family with blueberries.
I do. I'm going to tell you. I think you can actually have blueberries in almost in a lot. We're going to see.
That's fascinating.
If I can figure it out. Anyway.
Well,
yes.
Anyway, I really appreciate that you've took the lead on this. I appreciate everyone who's doing it. I'm figuring something out to say thank you to you all with, because the truth is that once you get through the backlog of 400 of them, I'm going to need you to keep going because a new one's going to come out, and then where are we going to be?
I think we'll keep going.
It's really nice.
You can have a cup of them.
A cup of blueberries.
A cup of blueberries are green, I think. Well, they have fructans. They're green for fructose and lactose and mannitol and sorbitol and GOS, but they have fructans in them.
Did you say fructans?
I know. Okay. They're low in a quarter cup, but then they're yellow at a third of a cup, and they're red if you have.
Oh, I see. Like severity. Cup. A whole cup.
You can have a quarter cup. You can have a quarter cup with no problem. And after that, it starts to get be problematic.
What the heck's a fructan? That sounds like something I did when I was younger.
See, there you go.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. I genuinely appreciate it. It's a very, like you guys, you obviously keep me in the loop, and it's like a very professional undertaking. I feel like a project manager when I get here. I'm like, wow, my people are working well together.
They're good people. They volunteered. Yeah. They're good people.
I genuinely believe that everyone listening to this podcast is good. And I'll tell you that I come to that from that private Facebook group because once it got to 7,000 people, wow. And it's still such a kind, gentle, lovely place to be. I was like, wow, there's something about this podcast that you must pull in people like this or something, but it's just, I don't know how to quantify it, but it's lovely. So, all right. So before we finish, to finish up, I'd like to understand, somebody's having an allergic reaction or a physical reaction. They can't figure out what it is. They're pretty sure it's food. They try a Fodmap diet, which is just very simply broken down as a 3-step process. Stop eating high Fodmap foods, slowly reintroduce them to see which ones are troublesome. Once you identify them, that cause symptoms, you can avoid or limit them while enjoying everything else worry-free, unless you're your family, which is...
And you're really supposed to do it with a dietitian for FODMAPs. They really recommend you do that with a dietitian, but yes.
Get a doctor. And so that's the process. But what happens when you're low FODMAP and type 1? Is it a more insulin situation or not necessarily?
So not specifically, really. You eat the same way you otherwise would eat, but there are certain things that we switched a little bit. So for us, it was just, I looked at the low FODMAP list and then I said, okay, these are things that are issues for us because of diabetes. So for example, Like I said, we were using apple juice for lows. We switched to grape juice. Honey was a sweetener that we were using. I don't know whether that's really for diabetes, but whatever, we switched to maple syrup. Artificial sweeteners are not good on a low FODMAP diet. So that's an issue. So, because artificial sweeteners are better if you're diabetic than using, too much.
Yeah.
So that's
just something less to have to think about. You know what the argument around artificial sweeteners is they make you hungry, so you don't eat sugar, but you eat something else, and it might be a toss up anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
but in terms of just like drinking and stuff, so you don't want to have like one of those,
Right.
Some kind of a drink with an artificial sweetener or whatever else. You actually need sugar, but then you're going to have to dose for that or whatever. You can't have high fructose corn syrup. That's something. So lots of candies and things don't work for lows. So a lot of it was really like, what are we going to use for lows?
Yeah, more immediate
that changed
stuff,
it.
right? Like when you need something to work right away, your brain goes to simple sugar. So what do you do in a panic situation?
So that was the issue. That was what I was really interested in the glycemic index thing, was saying that like fructose, like I was listening to that, and some of the things that work faster are actually high in FODMAP. And so maybe that's why some of our things don't work as well. But we use grape juice, or Eve uses chocolate, which doesn't work as fast, but that just happens to be something that she uses. So she has allergy-friendly chocolate bars that she keeps with her, and she uses that. She does use glucose tabs now, but she didn't used to. And then other things that were sort of relevant that's not really low FODMAP so much, but is sort of goes along with stomach issues a lot, is you really shouldn't have too much ibuprofen. So she was taking Tylenol, and she gets migraines too. So Tylenol then would affect the G5. Now at least she's on the Dexcom G6, so she can have more Tylenol, but not too much Tylenol, because then her G6 will still go wonky if you get too much. So that's an issue. Gluten-free pasta is something that you need to have, or gluten-free, and you eat gluten-free on the low FODMAP diet. So that's higher carb than some of the other grains. So that's kind of an issue. And a lot of the low carb foods also don't work with low FODMAP because they have inulin in them.
Okay.
Which is a problem. So there's just this like interaction of things. And I would say that low FODMAP interacts fine with diabetes. I think you just make some substitutions. I think and I would say you especially make substitutions for lows. I would say the hardest thing is really probably the allergies and the diabetes, because a lot of the low carb things that would be great go-tos are things that my daughter's allergic to, but that doesn't mean that everyone's allergic to.
Sure.
Wow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're not tired, then I'd be tired. Are you allergic to anything?
I don't eat soy because it gives me migraines, but ironically, everyone else in the house can eat soy. But no, I'm just allergic to like dogs and cats and environmental stuff, but not foods.
Wow. Jesus. All right.
But it won't kill me,
Are your children going to disclose this during dating? I think if they do, they're limiting themselves. They shouldn't. They should keep it very private.
My kids are real catches. I'm just going to say that.
Hey, if we get married, you won't be able to eat, anything. I hope you enjoy fish and rice.
Other than, no, they can't have fish.
No fish. Sorry.
That's not true. Actually, the girl's going to fish. My son can't have it. It depends. You have to pay attention to who. You got to think about it.
That cracked me up. No. Anyway, I'm sure they have other. I'm telling them, just they want to be earners. You know what I mean? Like wage earners. Like, so people are like, we can only eat 5 things, but she makes a good living.
Steak works,
Steak.
So yeah, they do. They need to make a good living because they really like steak and potatoes.
No kidding. Yeah, I was going to ask you, is it more expensive to eat this way or probably the meat?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Our food bills are like nuts.
Wow.
Ah!
Well,
no pun intended.
our food bills are like nuts. Well, I'm just glad that you ate the nuts slowly to get rid of the nut allergies and didn't rub them on you. Because I was like, as you were saying it, I'm like, is Meredith going to say we had to rub nuts on our kids? Then she didn't. And I was like, thank God. Anywho, you were really kind to do this. I am trying really hard to get all people's styles of eating included in the podcast. I had been having Paul on recently talking about carnivore. I only got one half, like kind of sideways pushback online from somebody who was like, that's, I forget what they said, the fad eating. And I was like, listen, it's fat. You call it whatever you want. I was like, the guy's got one of the most popular podcasts on Apple. Like it can't be because it's a fad. Like it must be because a lot of people are doing it. I don't know if it's right or wrong or not. I'm not making a judgment about it. I'm just trying to find out how other people eat and talk about it. So I really appreciate you doing this one because this one's specific, and you jumped right up and you're like, I can talk about Fodmap, and I was like, get out of here. All right. And then
I don't know how many people it'll will be relevant for, but I
think it'll be.
Oh, and I want to say one thing though.
Go ahead.
That I did not cover is with all of our crazy eating things. Eve's A1C is now down. The last time we had an appointment was now down to 5.1.
Wow. Well, that's because of me, though.
No,
I'm just kidding. I was joking. Stop. You don't let me make the joke and then go.
It is, though. It is. It absolutely is.
That's very cool. Good for you. Any of the other kids have markers for type 1 that you know of?
One does.
Yeah. Do we tell which one it is, or we just tell them it's one of you?
I know, and my child knows, but I don't need to.
No, I wouldn't ask you to tell everybody else. I was just wondering if you were like, hey, if you got them both tested and you said, hey, one of you's got it, but I'm not going to tell you which one.
No, I don't think I would do that. The child does know.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad, how long ago did you look? Would you use TrialNet?
I did TrialNet, and it was fairly soon after diagnosis.
Wow.
So a couple years ago.
Well,
I've been following it.
Something to look forward to. Or not.
Great.
Who knows?
Thanks, God.
Meredith, thank you very, very much. So that was Meredith, and this was another episode of How We Eat here on the Juicebox Podcast. Look for more coming soon. I'm going to ask you, what am I going to say to you? There's nothing to say. There's no ads. I'll tell you what, though. If you've been thinking about checking out the T1D exchange because you've heard me talking about it, I'm going to just put the information right here after the music. And if you haven't been thinking about doing that, just let me remind you that the show grows when you share it with others. Please subscribe in your podcast player or follow in your podcast player. If you're not listening in a podcast player, consider it. And that's it. I really appreciate you listening. The show's doing fantastic. It's all because of you guys, and I couldn't be more grateful. Last thing, the T1D Exchange. The T1D Exchange is looking for adult type 1s and caregivers of type 1s who are U.S. residents to participate in a quick survey that can be completed in just a few minutes from your computer or your phone. Right from your home, like on your sofa, you could do it. After you finish the questions, I took I did it in about 7 or 8 minutes. I didn't find the questions to be deeply probing. They were actually kind of basic questions about type 1 diabetes, but they need the data. They need the answers to these questions from many, many people. So I was happy to throw in with them. Anyway, when you're done, that's it. You're done. It's 100% anonymous. It's HIPAA compliant. You don't have to go to a doctor or a remote site, and you're still helping people. I think you might get an email from them like once a year where they'll be like, hey, there's another opportunity here for you. And if you're interested, you do it. And if not, don't do it. It's just you putting your answers into a registry that allows them to take that data and make decisions. They influence things that happen in the world for people with type 1s. For example, test strip coverage, Medicare coverage for CGMs, ADA guidelines for pediatric A1C goals. That kind of stuff they've impacted. Even labeling for CGMs to include finger stick replacements. That data helped with that. This is Super simple to do and incredibly valuable. T1dexchange.org/juicebox. You get there, click on join our registry now, answer the simple survey, and you're done. If you do it, you're helping other people with type 1 diabetes and you're helping the podcast. I hope you check it out. T1dexchange.org/juicebox.